This panel discussion focuses on the topic of restaking infrastructure needs, challenges, and vision. My name is Dan Octavian. I'm CTO at YieldNest. We build yield strategies in the space of restaking and DeFi, and we will be focusing today on discussing the topic of restaking infrastructure. We've been very lucky to witness the emergence of a new sector in our industry, which is restaking as a crypto economic security primitive. And you can argue this has been, if not one of the most notable innovations of this cycle. And we want to dive deeper today in understanding how restaking infrastructure is primed to change the future of our industry and disrupt other tech industries as well. We were honored to have a great lineup of builders in the space today. Some brilliant minds working on some very high impact projects. We have Nader Dabbit from Eigenlayer, Director of Developer Relations. As you all know, Eigenlayer introduced restaking to the space and currently is building shared security infrastructure where we can build all these decentralized services. We have Francisco Agosti, founder of Tansi, is building permissionless app chain infrastructure. And Grigore Roshu, who's building Pi Squared, which is trustless remote computing, AI, and interoperable smart contracts for any blockchain or dApp. And we have Alex Lipton, which is business development manager at SSV Labs, which is secure and scalable staking infrastructure powering the future of distributed ETH and restaking. So yeah, thanks everybody for attending this panel. I had a few questions prepared for today, but we can have an open discussion as well at the end. So really looking forward to go over the multiple topics. Was thinking to start with one of the maybe fundamental things that's currently powering the world of restaking, which is the Ethereum staking industry. So wanted to start off with a question for Alex. And on the topic of what does the future hold in terms of innovation and challenges for the staking infrastructure with all the new Ethereum upgrades, so the Dencun upgrade and any other future upgrades. So what are we looking forward in terms of innovation in the space of staking infrastructure?
It's a great question and really excited for the discussion today. And I think we'll have a really good chat with some bright minds working on some amazing restaking infrastructure. But I think when it comes to looking at the future, like we don't have a crystal ball, like we have amazing infrastructure and a lot of innovation, but it's really, tough to pinpoint at this stage, where a lot of the success is going to be had, but we could have a guess and take a look. I think, in terms of challenges, that we're looking to solve, I think, we're all kind of working on the same thing. It's a lot around, security and a lot around decentralization. I think, in the case of, SSB, what we're working on is we're really focused on the decentralization challenge. We have Pectra that's coming up, hopefully, by the end of this year or the start of next year, which effectively will tell you that you could raise the max effective balance of your validator from 32 ETH up to 2048 ETH. So this is going to be a really fundamental change in how the primary staking duties are going to be had when it comes to restaking. And with this, we might have some challenges around centralization because a lot of the professional node operators are really going to benefit on a per cost basis for validators where they can compress them 64 times under. So these are the kind of things I think we as an industry need to be really laser focused on and really help ensure that, Ethereum continues to adhere to the vision of decentralization where it really thrives.
Awesome, thank you. Does anybody else have any thoughts on this? particular topic.
This is slightly off topic, and I want to get back to that. But I just wanted to ask Grigor a question. Is it true that you taught Sriram at University of Washington?
Well, University of Illinois.
Or University of Illinois? Okay.
Yes, he was a student at University of Illinois.
Okay.
And
That's true, right? Okay.
yeah.
I thought that was really interesting because that gives a lot more context. Because he has such a he also has a very I would say rich background in other things, and I just want to call this out just because I think it adds a lot of value to understanding like where he's coming from with his company. What did you work on in the Ethereum protocol, like the original? Didn't you work on Ethereum or something like
I
that?
don't know what you worked on originally. I can tell you that at our university we have a very strong emphasis on formal semantics and correctness of everything, right? And some of that may have been, an influence.
Okay, got it. So I met someone from Pi Square, and they were telling me about your background, and maybe I misunderstood that part, but the first part about the University of Illinois was, I thought, very interesting. Okay, sorry, that was slightly off topic. On the question of how is Ethereum, roadmap and modifications are going to affect restaking, I think that, in my opinion, if you look at Ethereum and you want to have like an analogy of something else that's out there, the closest analogy I would say in the long term, believe it or not, to me, is it's like kind of like a very hardened, trusted, decentralized layer that the longer it's in existence and the longer it just sticks around, the more value it accrues, regardless if it gets these minor upgrades. Because we already kind of understand, what the value of Ethereum is. It's not going to change all that much, right? Just like we understand the value of Bitcoin, it offers like these two guarantees that they're going to be like an X number of Bitcoin and that you can actually have custody of your Bitcoin. And then Ethereum has its own core set of principles. And then we have all these like layers that get built on top of it. So I personally don't think that the underlying primitive, regardless of how much it changes, is going to affect these layers that are built on top all that much. Obviously, it will to some extent, but I don't think that it's going to be anything that is. I think the more important property that Ethereum should maintain is its, trust. And as long as that trust is there, that decentralization is there, then all these other layers will continue to expand and accrue value.
Yeah, I think what's going to be interesting to see is how these layers evolve over time, right? Because protocols like Eigenlayer, Symbiotic, these restaking protocols have unlocked this kind of shared security primitive, but then you start seeing friction points, beyond that, right? Like Eigenlayer has unlocked this shared security primitive, but what we're starting to see, at least in Tansy, is that, to deploy these ABSs, there's still a lot of like friction points, right? Particularly around like having to onboard operators, that's already quite a lot of work for teams, right? Having to deal with all these operators. From the operator side, it's also like, okay, what ABSs do we actually want to secure? There's this kind of inefficient market of information, right? That it takes a lot of time to set these things up. So I think we're going to start to see layers addressing these friction points. At least at Tansy, that's what we want to tackle, right? Trying to aggregate validators into one place, accruing economic security on behalf of networks or ABSs so that it becomes more frictionless in that sense. So, and then on top of that layer, I think we're going to start to see more optimizations. In general, I think it's going to be very interesting to see how the restaking kind of landscape evolves over time, since we're like extremely early at this point, in my opinion.
Maybe I hope you don't mind if I take your role as moderator and ask a question. That's what.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know if obviously on Twitter or X, there's been a lot of speculation on what Justin Drake might announce at DevCon tomorrow. I don't know if anyone has any ideas or here in the audience, or I'm not sure if anyone has any clue what the changes that they envision at the Ethereum Foundation on what might come next and how that will impact restaking.
I actually don't. I know that there's been a lot of conversation and speculation, and there's been a hint, but I'm waiting to actually see the talk and also watch and see people dissect it and explain it in different ways. That's going to be a fun thing to do tonight.
A lot to unpack, I think, in the next few days when he announces it.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. On the topic, Nader, since we we touched on this topic briefly, wanted to also get your thoughts on, in terms of just the Ethereum ecosystem as a whole, what AVSs or types of AVSs categories, let's say, do you think would benefit the Ethereum ecosystem as a whole? And what do you think in terms of just using the restaking stack? What do you think the Ethereum community itself should focus on when thinking about how to improve Ethereum itself?
So I think the interesting thing about EigenLayer is that, and also just the restaking platforms in general, it's that they're agnostic to any VM. The fact that it's built on Ethereum is mainly due to the fact that that's where there was a ton of value accrual already and liquidity. And we could also build a smart contract that would enable this, right? You can't do this on Bitcoin. That would have been, there is a version of this, but it's not native, right? This is native to Ethereum. So that's I guess, foundation of what I'm about to say. I think the true value is completely getting outside of the EVM and Ethereum and any VM, and really thinking about how we're now kind of evolved past being restricted by a blockchain VM. We had these coupled pieces that in the past required you to build an entire blockchain from the ground up. If you needed a differentiating feature, you had to fork Bitcoin or build Litecoin or Namecoin or whatever. And then we had Ethereum, which was like the first developer platform that allowed inheriting Ethereum security or some security, and you just write a few lines of code and deploy a smart contract. But you were constrained by the blockchain VM. You were constrained by the EVM, by the SVM, by the MoveVM. Now we're expanded beyond all these VMs. You can now write your program in any programming language, Rust, TypeScript, Python, whatever, possibly even human languages with PySquare. And then the verification is just done on chain. So therefore, we're not bound by any VM. And I think right now, like he mentioned a moment ago, Francisco, how it is, there's still friction in actually building this, but ultimately, I think a couple of years from now, it'll be as simple to build an AVS as it is to write a smart contract or just to write a program. And we're already kind of starting to see that really with layer.xyz. We're starting to see that with, there's Gadget and all these different frameworks out there that are kind of like getting to that point. But I think that's my general thoughts about that.
I totally agree with that, and I like to, add more weight to it. So we should not be restricted by the programming language. So the programming language community has invented lots of programming languages over the, many decades of research and engineering, and to be limited to just one language is, at best, very uneconomical. And there are lots of amazing programmers out there in the Web 2 world. When they look at EVM, they say, well, it's so restrictive. Why should we program in this? We like to use our languages, even C or C++, and why to restrict? And of course, there is a simple way to do it, the simple-minded way to do it. Say, just compile everything to EVM, and now you can run it on Ethereum. But we don't want that. First of all, these compilers don't exist. Second, if we write them, most likely they'll have bugs if we write them under, pressure. And third, EVM itself is limited in many aspects. So we'd like to be able to use any programming language. And since you mentioned PySquared, and I'm representing PySquared, that's what we do at PySquared, right? So we basically want to support all programming languages in a way that is what we call correct by construction, right? So once you have a formal semantics of a programming language, and there are many of them, more than 20 formal semantics of languages, now you can execute programs in that language, and you have a mathematical proof that the program was executed correctly. And that mathematical proof can serve now as a correctness certificate to be verified by an AVS, for example, right, to verify that you know that execution, although it didn't happen on chain, is correctly done. So that gives us everything we need to support all programming languages and all applications out there on chain. Because you don't have to execute them on chain, you just have to verify them on chain, make sure that they were done right. And how can you verify them? Well, verify the mathematical proof. You don't even need to re-execute them.
Yeah. I think it's pretty interesting. Restaking undoubtedly, in my view, is going to fundamentally change the crypto economy. We're really at the early days of putting these building blocks in place and actually developing these AVS and just having conversations out here with a lot of people like, hey, I'm building an app chain, really like the idea of, restaking and building an AVS, but it's really tough to do so. There's a lot of friction points and, just having the ability to, code it in any language and having the frameworks in place to deploy an AVS across multiple restaking protocols is very powerful and really allows developers to, unleash their creativity, build lots of use cases, and really catalyze the growth of this ecosystem, which we're all here today talking about.
I mean, language is one thing, but then there's also the consensus protocol. Not all applications require total ordering. Many of them can be done, can be executed at amazing speeds if they do not have to obey this tyranny of sequentiality.
This is the core, I would say, like fundamental understanding of what you can do when you realize that is just completely unnecessary for so many use cases. You do not need consensus and ordering. All you need is verification, decentralization, and then trust, and all these other properties. In fact, you're bound by a lot of constraints when you require all of these properties together.
Yeah, in terms of the use case question, at least at Tansy, we see one set of use cases which is very analogous to like the RAS and app chain kind of thesis, right? We're seeing a lot of traction with gaming in general, RWAs, DeFi. I think that's kind of one subset of use cases that can be tackled by networks or AVSs. But I think there's also this kind of, and it comes down to trade-offs, right? Like a lot of the developers that we work with, they want to optimize for trade-offs that rollups are not necessarily optimized for. So they don't want to compromise on decentralization, on customizability, on fast finality, all of which are properties that are not kind of well catered towards with rollups. But there's also kind of this new use case that I think we're going to start seeing with EigenLayer, Symbiotic, these restaking protocols that are like complementary to rollups, right? And that this is kind of an interesting spectrum that we're going to start to see. I know some projects like AllLayer, we're going to do this as well, right? Like they're building AVSs that could be like shared decentralized sequencer set, proof networks, fast finality networks. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of this relationship between the AVS landscape, the use cases that can derive from that with like existing rollups. And I think that's still like very early on. A lot of these things are still in development, but yeah, we're tackling a lot of these issues that are well known in the industry, specifically with like kind of the RAS space. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's would be interesting to maybe dig a little deeper into that topic in terms of infrastructure as a service in our industry. One thing that is a question there is a consideration beyond just making it easy, which I know you guys are working on currently. Yeah, what do you think the challenges are in terms of maintaining that over time, like the overhead of let's say setting up infrastructure becomes easier with the infrastructure as a service, but what are the challenges around maintaining that over time, associated costs, and is this type of approach of rolling out your infrastructure something that's reserved for protocols that already have a lot of traction, or is it a good starting point for early stage protocols as well?
Yeah, no, I think what we're trying to do is making it possible for early stage protocols as well, right? We just see kind of a lot of friction points in general throughout the developer experience of having to deploy an AVS, right? The first, and I can kind of split it into two categories. I would say one is kind of the economic side of things, which we're starting to realize is becoming increasingly important. How do you incentivize operators to actually secure these services? And that's already kind of a problem set in and of itself, right? You have to kind of onboard operators, incentivize them. if the ABS itself is off chain, that's not so easy to do for teams, right? And then on the other side, on the protocol level, if you want to build decentralized networks, you need things like consensus, finality, block production, things like that. So at Tansy, at least what we're trying to do is kind of abstract away a lot of these infrastructural responsibilities away from teams, right? So you can kind of think of Tansy as a network or an AVS to deploy other networks or AVSs. We're going to build a chain that has, hundreds of validators, hundreds of decentralized sequencers, data availability to provide these kind of protocol primitives out of the box. But it's also important for it to act as a kind of a financial engine for incentivization, right? Because what we're starting to see is that there is this kind of inefficient market between, AVSs or developers, operators. So what we want to do is kind of incentivize these things permissionlessly through a protocol, right? So that anybody that wants to tap into a protocol like Symbiotic can do that without any friction, right? And without compromising on decentralization and security. I think this is going to be quite important in the future because we're seeing projects struggle in this area, right? How do you pay for the security? So I think these are problems that are well suited for like on-chain services, for on-chain protocols. So that's kind of what we're trying to tackle.
Awesome. On that topic, I think it's on the aspect of the economic security aspect, and I think one thing that we've seen is that the emergence of just a lot of assets as potential, let's say, restaking collateral, and at the beginning, there was a strong belief that, let's say, native restaking is let's say, a higher quality type of collateral in terms of security guarantees and security properties. I was wondering what you guys think, if that is still the case, and how should the market value, let's say, economic security provided through native restaking versus tokenized assets? Should it differentiate between the two, and what would be is one more valuable than the other?
Yeah, I think it's important to make the differentiation. I think if we take a step back and break it down one by one, so obviously you have your native staking, then you have your LSTs, and then beyond that you have other assets, so more exotic strategies you could do on top. So a native staking, in my view, that's really the purest form of doing it. That's where you have all the incentives aligned really nicely to provide that crypto economic security to secure down other services. Beyond that, you have LSTs. And when you're obviously when you restake LSTs, you're adding an extra layer of smart contract risk. But as well, when we look at the operator set that's securing that, how decentralized is the operator set? Are they using, DBT? Do they run their validators in-house? Really looking and doing your due diligence on how that, operational resiliency is working around the validator set is really important. And there's some, I would say better, LST design choices than others in the market. So whether you choose one or the other to obviously secure the services is a thing to look at. Beyond that as well, we've also seen the emergence of other assets that are being used to restake. Obviously with BTC, it's provides a lot of crypto economic security, but it's got a lot of challenges developing on that currently. Or you could use a lot of stable coins in the market as well, but you do assume a lot of RWA risk when you use those. So it's an interesting market to see at the moment, and really it's about delegators, and they'll vote with their feet in terms of where they'll put their capital, and which operators will use those, or which AVS will be secured with those assets.
Does anybody else have any thoughts on that question? Thanks very much, Alex.
Yeah, I think it's going to be easy. It's going to be interesting to see how this kind of evolves from a financial standpoint, right? And I was curious to get Alex's take as well as this, because you guys kind of specialize in native ETH staking, but a lot of the teams that we speak to, they want to contribute to their own security using their own token, right? So I think it's kind of a spectrum of risk, right? Like the long tail assets obviously present more risk in terms of using it for like the security of networks. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how that unfolds. Then you add kind of LRTs to the mix. There's a lot of different financial strategies that people that stakers and operators can opt into. So yeah, we'll kind of see how that evolves over time. And a lot of that is like very analogous to TradFi products, right? Like with LRT specifically, they're very similar to kind of the CDOs that we saw back in the day in 2008. So there's just like a broad spectrum of risk that, yeah, we'll see what happens. I assume that at some point, some LRTs are going to be kind of maximizing the risk in return for reward, and we might see some black swan events happening, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that the LRT space will be invalidated, since if you look at kind of the CDO and market today, it's still very large, right? So I do see a lot of like analogies with TradFi products and what's happened in the past.
Yeah, I see a lot of analogies with TradFi actually. Even in the like ETF space, for example, like in TradFi, you have ETFs for the automobile industry. I can totally envisage a day where you see like LRTs that are specifically focused on Oracle revenue or this kind of thing as well. So really, it's about the securitization, packaging up these products, and how they're put out there in the market. So I think there's a role for different collateral assets, different ABS, and how they reward their users. And this is going to be emerging over the next few years. So it's going to be fascinating to see how it plays out.
I mean, I think the advantage with at least on chain and Web3 is that all this is like programmable, right? On chain, that's kind of the big difference with TradFi, where if like somebody defaults or they don't want to pay, like you have to go through this like pain in the ass process of suing, and it's inefficient, right? Whereas with Web3, DeFi, and restaking, all of this is kind of like just programmable logic on chain that makes things a lot more efficient. So
For sure.
Has anyone ever read the book, The Mystery of Capital? Has anyone in this audience ever read The Mystery of Capital? He has. Do you like that book? It was good, right? Anyway, it sounds so unbelievably boring, and it was written like 30 years ago. But I started reading it because someone that I really trust and just wouldn't stop talking about it, and it sounded so boring. But I decided to listen to it and have the audiobook. And it was written before blockchains existed, but it explains essentially something that I've never like an approach to describing why countries that are financially orders of magnitude more successful than other countries, why that is. And the explanation after I heard it, it was just like, wow, this is so obvious, and it's hard to just like say in a quick panel talk. But I would just kind of say that it's really interesting to kind of understand and see the evolution of the packaging and repackaging of these new, like this new asset class as well. Because if you go back in time and you kind of look at how things have evolved over the last like 5,000 years, even, you kind of see a similar pattern, and kind of seeing it now take this same the same things kind of that are happening that have happened forever are just evolving into the newer technologies. Anyway, so if you want to read a really good book, it's called The Mystery of Capital, and it's really awesome, and I just recommend it for anyone that's interested in blockchain stuff.
Yeah, I genuinely see this as a paradigm shift. And, if you take the history and long view, I think it's really at a moment that's analogous to like the Dutch East India Company and issuing the first equities, the 1700s or whatever century it was. But yeah, really, like we have all this infrastructure that's powering, value transfer across the world, and it's packaging all of these capital flows, and, all this is emerging out of it. And it's fascinating to see all the plumbing getting laid down in front of us.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks everybody. I was thinking that we could also look a little bit more into the future, or maybe the present, and discuss the idea of how AVSs and services that make use of restaking can potentially disrupt other industries other than crypto. And I know Grigore is building in this very generalized space of trustless computing, which I guess would apply to other industries as well. So I wanted to get your thoughts on what other industries this new crypto economic primitive can potentially really disrupt, and is that AI? Is it in other industries as well?
Hmm. So let's see how broad can we be here. So basically, I think everything, any computation, it can be verified. So if you have nothing to hide, um, and I hope many businesses out there don't have much to hide, then you can turn the product of their business into a verifiable artifact. And if that is the case, then I think we can bring it right to this industry. It doesn't matter what programming language it is written in. It doesn't matter what protocol it has under the hood. But in the end, you can package it as and if you go also through the ZK technology, when it's ready, you can package it into a very efficiently verifiable um, uh, proof of truth. Let's take a centralized exchange, for example. Right? A centralized exchange may look like a centralized thing, so it cannot be on-chain, but in the end, the centralized exchange can produce a sequence of everything it did. It can satisfy all the constraints, all the liveness and the safety constraints of all the transactions. Could be very high speed, and in the end, it can produce a proof. And once that happens, voila, we have it, on chain now through restaking. Cloud services as well. Maybe flight paths on airplanes, navigation, everything can be in the end packaged. I think if you, trying to be as broad as possible. If you have nothing to hide and you can produce a proof for what you've done, then I think it can become, a user of our technology, including AI also, and this is something interesting, including even programs that you may not want to make public. Okay, suppose that you have an LLM, right? Your company, you have the entire business oriented, focused on one particular LLM, which is your IP. But you want to prove that your LLM is, let's say, compliant with whatever regulations out there, right? So then you can run the LLM, which is proprietary, and you can produce a proof of its execution and also proof of compliance with, I don't know, some SEC regulations of some sort or whatever they are. And you can actually produce a proof that a program that is not public, but it satisfies all these requirements, executed on your data, which is private as well, and produce this result, right? So that can very well fit also the model. So it can be very broad.
So the way I kind of look at it is like over the time, I think the most innovation that we've seen unleashed has come in waves when we've seen a new kind of like developer platform in the software world come into existence. So an example is the App Store. And the App Store came into existence not due to the App Store, but due to Xcode, Objective-C, Swift, and the App Store and Apple and all these things. They came together to offer this new platform. And when this came out, everyone and their mother was like, oh, I'm going to build the next $1 million app. And everyone did. I mean, so many people just decided to go build an app. And they offer this new platform for building mobile applications. AWS Cloud, Google Cloud, the idea of like not having to do all this stuff from scratch, but being able to spin up an EC2 instance or a DigitalOcean droplet and make your application available to the world in 5 seconds. And then if you want to go further than that, you can get a CloudFront distribution and DynamoDB and all these different things and tie them together and go to market with your idea and innovate a lot more quickly. And then we've seen even abstractions built on top of that. You have Vercel and Cloudflare and all these different developer platforms. And every time a new developer platform comes into existence, and now we have AI LLMs, right? Anyone can just go build out any idea, and it takes them literally like 30 minutes sometimes to prototype something. And we're now seeing this new wave of innovation. And the way I look at restaking is it's now a new developer platform that allows anyone to build anything that they would like verifiably without having to go through all of this work that they did in the past. And what that's basically going to do is it's going to lower the barrier to entry for people to build new things. And we're going to see a lot of things fail, just like we see. If you try to say, why doesn't every smart contract deploy to Ethereum? Like, why don't they all become big companies? Ethereum's a failure. Like, what if someone said that? That would be insane, right? Because you can just go and just spin up a smart contract and pay the gas and deploy it. And 99.999% of them fail, right? But then you have Aave, and you have these big success stories. So I think just lowering the barrier to entry to innovation, allowing people to kind of experiment with new things, it's going to lead to a lot of failures, but it's also going to lead to a lot of success because people can rapidly iterate, experiment, try new things, fail faster. And I think that's always been the nature of software innovation. And I think we're just now applying that to the blockchain world.
Just to take the AVS example, I think what you mentioned about centralized exchange is fascinating. Just like me, I don't know, thinking out loud, like you could even have like a centralized exchange that would have a verifiable proof that they have their proof of reserves. And they'd really benefit from that, but having building that trust with users that is there, but they may not want to, publish it, what they have, a balance sheet. But, when obviously, things go awry, then obviously you have restaking mechanisms there that, can, protect their users and all this kind of thing. So really it's a canvas for people to build, whatever type of mechanism they want. Maybe that's to build trust. Maybe that's to, provide revenues. Really any motivation to build a AVS is fascinating.
I think another kind of sector that's that I think is that has a lot of potential on his point about verifiability, right? And we saw it right now with the U.S. elections, right? It's just, I think in the public sector in general, that vertical can benefit a lot from just like transparency, verifiability. You saw it with Polymarket now, how inaccurate kind of the media was portraying everything and how accurate Polymarket was. Also, if you think of like government spending, right? Like I come from Venezuela where there's like just a ridiculous amount of corruption and capital inefficiencies that derive from corruption. So if you can imagine putting kind of these government spending structures that are verifiable on chain, I think it would make things like dramatically more capital efficient. So I think that sector in general, I find super attractive for like developing economies. Obviously, there has to be some sort of willingness from the public sector to embrace these technologies. And that's like a whole other rabbit hole that we can get into. But in general, I think that there can be like a huge leap in progress in that area specifically, apart from all the things like finance and that are obvious for Web3.
It also requires a certain mindset, right? So we have to
exactly.
think in terms of verifiability,
Maybe El Salvador first.
Yeah, El Salvador is a great example, right? But there's a leader there that is kind of pushing that forward, right? If the leader is not willing, then it makes it more difficult.
but then the public may demand it. If you are not,
Yeah.
if you don't satisfy these requirements, then we don't use you, because we cannot verify what you've done. So I think the public can actually push it.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. That was very, very interesting and very, very insightful. I think we've pretty much reached the end of this panel. So maybe we have a little bit of time for questions for any of our guests here. If anybody in the audience has any questions.
Hi, it's Ali Johnson from StateCat here. We're sort of specializing in DVT and running AVS as a professional node operator on EigenLayer. Part of our challenge as node operators is keeping up with all the multiple chains. Obviously, EigenLayer being that sort of more centralized platform connecting the networks and node operators with the AVSs. Is there any plans to help node operators or expand that out a bit to make it an easier process for operators?
Yes, we're working on making it completely permissionless and open and providing essentially a place for AVSs and operators and everyone, all these stakeholders to connect in a very seamless manner. And you'll probably hear more about that in the near future. But yeah, right now it is a point of friction for AVS teams to connect with these operators. And there just needs to be a much simpler way, and we're working on it. Good question.
So Clem from Restaking Info here. I was just wondering, do you guys see a future where like a lot of these restaking protocols are going to like interop with each other. Like I guess as part of the recent week of conferences, we've seen that interop is a pretty big theme amongst a lot of talks and events. So do you think there'll be an interop layer between like all of these restaking protocols to sort of increase the pool security across them?
I'm curious to hear some other ideas. I'll also share mine later.
Well, I think it's well needed, right? I mean, capital's very fragmented across the main protocols. Like they each have their own operators, they each have their own AVS or services that are being built, within their framework. So it makes sense, but I defer to the bright minds, in this room at this conference who are really specifically working on this problem because, yeah, it's well needed.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't predict the future, but I think it's interesting to see that there's Ton Protocol, Barachain, Monad, Solana, Bitcoin, all building out essentially what is EigenLayer or a version of that. And that's truly interesting. And then if you kind of listen to, or if you kind of go back and look at all of the history of business and also software, you have these two things. And I think Jim Barksdale, who is the CEO of Netscape when the internet was essentially invented, he said, there are two ways to make money in software, bundling and unbundling. So what you're talking about is bundling. So I think that people will attempt to do that. And what you're kind of seeing in the blockchain world today is that exact thing. You have bundling and unbundling, and you have all these different mechanisms of doing that. You have cross-chain interoperability, you have layer twos, and then you have these layer two clusters trying to bundle them back together. So I don't know. I have no idea, but that's a good question.
As restaking will make Ethereum stakers like have to do a bit more work, I think, to actually get much more yield. So that's cool as a custodian, but as a solo staker, will that not kind of eliminate solo stakers from a lot of the Ethereum ecosystem in the future? Also talking, the infrastructure offer is mostly for big custodians, right?
Yeah, I think this is a big issue. So a lot of, obviously, the Ethereum staking yield is tending downwards, which, increases the need for, optimizations on MEV, for, gating incentives on a lot of infrastructure or plays or doing different strategies on top, running different sidecars on your validator and all around just, running different things on the validator as a whole, which, all that knowledge and expertise is, often, a lot of the professional node operators are first movers in that case, and it becomes harder to become a solo staker. So, I think, technologies that, we're working on, like with DBT and really lowering the barriers of entry for solo stakers to come in and reducing the cost to actually run a validator is important. But, we all know that Ethereum itself really thrives off a decentralized validator set. And solo stakers are part and parcel of that and really the grassroots. So, it's something, we need to be cognizant of and, really ensuring that we promote solo staking to secure the Ethereum network.